Mr. McNamara, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and Senators. Thank you all for allowing me to be here this morning.
And just introduce yourself and who you represent.
Parnell McNamara, current Sheriff of McLennan County. County seat is Waco.
Thank you.
Prior to that, I spent 33 years with the United States Marshal Service, and I have taught the concealed handgun training for the past 9 years.
All right, you may proceed with your testimony.
During my career in law enforcement, I, like many law enforcement officers, have seen a lot of things that were extremely disturbing. Some of them, the images stick with you for a lifetime. And during that time, we dealt with a lot of bad things that happened to defenseless people. We had a young girl kidnapped from one of our campuses there in Waco, Texas State Technical College, by a killer. She was taken off in the dark and murdered right off campus. Shortly before that, the criminal came to Austin, and he kidnapped a beautiful young girl named Colleen Reed, who had been to church and was washing her car on 6th Street. I was involved in that case. I worked with Austin officers here, and he carried Colleen off, tortured her for hours, and then eventually brutally murdered her. I was on the team that found her remains 7 years later in Falls County. I was also one of her pallbearers. Things like that stick with you. That killer, Kenneth Allen McDuff, went on to kill upwards of 15 people. 2 of them young boys, all the others were innocent young women. None of these people had any protection whatsoever. It was prior to the CHL program. It was in the early 90s. And the things that happened to these people have stuck with me all these years. And I'm a very big proponent and supporter of the Second Amendment and the CHL program. I think individuals have a right to protect themselves, their friends, their family, and loved ones, and they not only have a right, but they have an obligation to survive and get home at night. And I completely support concealed carry on campus, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to give you some reasons. First of all, the police can't be everywhere at once. We simply can't. The person, the victim, say you, are the first responders, not the police. You're the first one that knows what's happening to you. And when the chips are down and you're in dire straits, the police are way down the road. I would love to say I can go up and I can stop crime and I can stop robberies and so forth, but we simply can't. We come in at the tail end of it and try to figure out who did it and bring them to justice. But the person that it's happening to should be able to take responsibility for their own safety. Concealed carry on campus, I think, would be a very, very positive thing. If you've ever seen pictures of Sandy Hook, Columbine, or Virginia Tech, you can't get those images out of your mind. And what if one person, what if one professor, one teacher, or one college student of age with a CHL license had been able to defend themselves or their classmates? Maybe the body count wouldn't have been nearly as high. One classroom, every person in it in Virginia Tech was murdered. And so I fully believe that concealed carry on campus would be a positive thing. As we've talked before, the concealed handgun license has to be, you have to be at least 21 years old. You have to go through the training, and you take the shooting. You have a written course in legal aspects of concealed carry, where not to carry, nonviolent dispute resolution, which teaches you how not to use your firearm if you possibly can, safe storage of firearms and marksmanship, and use of force and deadly force. I think it would be a positive thing. I think people have their right, whether they're in a classroom with an active shooter, whether they're a young lady trying to get across campus at night after she leaves the library and trying to make it back safely to her dorm, or whether it be a professor who leaves a classroom late at night, walks across campus to his car in a dark parking lot. People have a right to survive. I feel they have an obligation to get home safely to their family and loved ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. And Senator Zaffarini, do I see pressure
Yes.
light? Yes, ma'am.
Sheriff, I too have vivid images of the day Charles Whitman killed all those people from the tower. And when he started, I was within range in the old journalism building on the campus and
Yes, ma'am.
spent most of my time outside the student union, which is still the student union today.
Sure. Yes,
I
ma'am.
cannot imagine what would have happened if numerous students had had weapons at that time. How could you differentiate, again, the bad actor from the good, other than in this case, he was at the top of the tower? How many people might have risked their lives, as the law enforcement officials did, to go up that tower and risk being killed by him?
I don't have an answer for that, ma'am. I do know that when people are faced with cold-blooded killers, they stand a chance if they have protection. And Whitman was on the tower. If somebody had a high-powered rifle, a deer hunter or something like that, and could have gotten a shot at him, it may have been a different story. And I know that, and I feel for you having to go through that. I had a cousin down here attending at that time. It was very traumatic for everybody. It was traumatic for us. I was in Baylor at that time, and so it hit home to me. But I just feel strongly about an individual's right to protect themselves, because the police cannot be everywhere at once, and they're the first responder.
But you don't think that in circumstances like that on campuses, it's better to let the law enforcement officials deal with the issue rather than have young people, 21, 25 years old, trying to deal with that themselves and risking their lives?
Like Senator Birdwell said earlier, the concealed handgun license is a defensive license to protect yourself if your life is threatened. It's not a tactical license where you go toward the sound of firing. That is left up to the police. The McLennan County Sheriff's Office, we put on presentations for elementary schools, junior high, high school, and colleges throughout our county, and we teach them to retreat or whatever measure they can take that will get them out of the danger zone. The police show up. We have SWAT teams that respond. But how much damage can be done in a school before the police get there? Virginia Tech, for instance, he bolted the doors, chained them where the police couldn't get in there. If one professor, one teacher, or one student had a concealed handgun license, had the training, and was able to use that firearm efficiently, so many of those young people may still be alive. There are a lot of what-ifs. There are a lot of different scenarios, and I understand what you're saying. Charles Whitman is a very different situation. It was a man with multiple guns, and he took a stance up on top of the tower. Luckily, there were good, brave police officers that went up there and took him out and killed him right there in the tower. And I do understand what you're saying, but the concealed handgun license is a defensive license.
Do you worry at all about someone who could enter a crowded place or a university or a classroom without a weapon and not have a license to carry a weapon, either concealed or openly, but then take a weapon from someone who did and then cause great harm?
I suppose that's a possibility, but I think the danger of somebody coming in with a weapon and doing damage and injuring or killing people is much greater than that.
And do you have any idea about how law enforcement officials could deal with people whom they considered, for whatever reason, to look dangerous, and that person was carrying openly? How could they deal with that person?
We're trained in school and through years of experience to try to be a good judge of character. Are we always right? No, ma'am, we're not. But we can pretty well tell by someone's body action, their eye movement, things like that, telltale signs that make someone look suspicious for one reason or another. We do it every day, whether they're drug dealers, whether they're potential robbers or what. Most police can pretty well tell if someone is involved in criminal activity. And I think one of these bills, like right now, a police officer has the right to ask you for your concealed license. and you have to, by law, show it. And so if they see someone, say, carrying open, they have that right to say, let me check your license, just like they do driver's license checks. It's not profiling for ethnic reasons at all.
Well, I guess there's some disagreement on that issue. I can name you a bank president who has a PhD who considers himself a victim of racial or ethnic profiling on
Well,
multiple occasions, and others have been, so I'm concerned about that.
Okay, excuse me, I'm sorry, ma'am.
Having evidence, having experience with people who consider themselves victims of racial or ethnic profiling, I worry about how this would be dealt with regarding open carry.
I can assure you that the McLennan County Sheriff's Office does not tolerate any kind of racial profiling, and I'm not aware of any department that promotes that at all. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen from time to time, but we don't allow it, we don't tolerate it one bit.
No, and it's not necessarily a department, it's individuals who profile racially or ethnically. Individuals, not necessarily a department.
Yes, ma'am, I understand. I don't know any of our officers that racially profile anyone.
No, and again,
I
I'm
won't,
talking
as the
statewide.
sheriff, I will not tolerate that.
I'm talking statewide.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Estes?
Just to elaborate, and it's amazing how you can do research on your little smartphone. During the incident at the University of Texas, historians say that down below, armed citizens shot back with their deer rifles, offering resistance to the shots fired from above. He was running to all four sides of the tower. He was leaning over. He was shooting. He was killing people, wounding people. Then after a while, the fire started to be returned to the tower. So he was dodging and ducking and crawling around and all, end quote. So there was resistance from people on the ground.
Well, believe me, I
Madam
was
Chair.
there. I remember vividly.
Yeah.
To this
Senator
day.
Schwartner?
Madam Chair, Senator Zaffarini, my mother and my mother's husband, before he passed away, were both students there. At that time, he actually took his deer rifle up, he was a student, to the bell tower of that little church at the northwest corner of campus. Went to the top of the bell tower, there was a police officer there with a handgun. He wanted to hand his gun, scope rifle, to the police officer so that he could shoot. But actually, the police officer said, "It's your gun, shoot." And that's detailed in Texas Monthly. My mother reported it, and they went ahead and printed it. But I think individuals do have a right to defend themselves. And at that time, the police were undermanned and did not have the proper equipment. But it's absolutely true that at the time of Charles Whitman's massacre, there were citizens actively trying to fight back.
Thank you. Any other questions, Senator Birdwell?
Madam Chair, if I may, Sheriff, thank you again for joining us. I appreciate you taking time from your duty to do so. You had mentioned about police are a long way down the chain when something's occurring. Could you give us your summation of response times, whether it's general averages and the like, associated with these types of an active shooter circumstance, those types of things? What both your experience as sheriff and in the United States Marshal's service?
That would all, response time would certainly depend on the proximity, say, of the school to where our officers were. Our SWAT team can be activated fairly quickly, but still you've got to get officers, you've got to get them suited up, you've got to get your armored personnel vehicle en route or whatever you choose to send. We have 2 armored personnel vehicles they're all bulletproof. So response time can be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to 20 minutes or more. We get there as fast as we possibly can. As fast as our cars will take us, we're burning up the road. In the meantime, the active shooter is having a field day taking out innocent, defenseless people. And so we get there as fast as we can, and that's why I say the victim is the first responder, and how they are able to respond at the first few seconds of an assault or an attack is going to make a difference of whether they survive or not. And we get there as fast as we can. So many times we may get there too late, and that's the sad part about it.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I?
Yes, Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for your testimony. Let me just, I just want to be clear about, given your background, how this scenario would play out. And I'm just giving a hypothetical. College campus, people have concealed weapons on them, students. Say a student, for whatever reason, gets out his weapon and he's either going to start shooting at another student or the professor.
Thank you.
Other students with a concealed handgun license under this bill then, like you say, want to defend themselves, take out their gun. At that very moment, the security or the campus police come upon the scene. How do they distinguish between who is the perpetrator and the innocent students that with the concealed handguns that are now trying to defend themselves? Who does that officer shoot at?
The officer probably, when he approaches the classroom and the shooters, will give the command, everybody to put your guns down. He may give them that chance, and he probably should. Usually the shooter will not do that. The law-abiding citizen will. That's one of the main things that we do. Concealed handgun licensees are trained that in the class. They're trained that when the police get there, you put your gun down immediately and your hands up when police arrive. And so that way it'll distinguish you from the bad guy, from the criminal.
And that's what Senator Estes said also, basically, and I just wonder, in the conflict of the moment, the heat of the moment, the terror of the moment, students or others would in fact put their hand, would immediately,
Sure.
Yes. Put their hands up or drop their gun. I mean, it's a life-threatening situation, and I'm not even. And then on top of that, the example I gave earlier that was expressed in the San Antonio newspaper last year about the police coming up upon a gunman in the Empire State Building and ending up shooting 9 innocent people in the area too. I mean, that's a real. Do you appreciate that concern that some people have about the proliferation of guns on campus?
I appreciate your concern or other people's concern. My concern is an active shooter coming on, and you were talking about the classroom, an individual coming in.
As a hypothetical, could be outside on the campus.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and I respect your point of view, and I respect your opinion. The terror or horror, in my opinion, is when that shooter pulls his gun out and starts shooting innocent people. And I have 3 grandchildren. They're not of school age yet, but when they're in college, and I hope they are, and an active shooter comes in, I hope and pray that somebody in that room will have a concealed handgun license, have a handgun, and can possibly save their life. Because I don't want the criminal, the active shooter, to be the only person in that classroom shooting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Also want to note, we have Senator Huffines, who's visiting with us as well. Welcome to the committee, Senator. Senator Ellis, you had another question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Sheriff McNamara, for being here. I want to follow up just briefly on Senator Zaffarini's question on the profiling, ethnic or racial profiling issue. I hadn't met you before, but I do know Commissioner Lester Gibson well.
Yes, sir.
And give him
He's a friend of mine.
I've worked with him over in your county on trying to do something about the disproportionate impact of some enforcement issues on African Americans in particular. I think he was trying to get a grant to create a public defender office in McClendon County a couple of years ago, and I was helping him facilitate some.
Right, I believe he was trying to do that before I took over as sheriff, but I'm aware of that. Yes, sir.
Yeah. On the issue of profiling, you made the comment that law enforcement is trained to know how people will act if they're confronting someone. And I was just thinking about my colleague, Senator Estes, pulling something up on his iPhone. Don't you think some criminals are sophisticated enough now to go on an iPad, iPhone, and pull up whatever the secrets are that you taught law enforcement about how someone may react if they have a gun, shouldn't have a gun. You get me? I'm just saying, in this day and age, everything, sometimes fortunately, sometimes unfortunately, is so transparent.
Right.
You Google it in.
Yes, sir, it is.
You find out almost anything. Half of them may be wrong, but at least you find out what somebody is.
I have never heard of a criminal taking that amount of time to do that, but I'm sure they probably have.
Maybe all of them in Harris County. We ought to see if they want to move to McClendon there, because they do in our county.
Right.
But I just want to mention that, not
Yes, sir.
not to be argumentative, but just in this day and age, you know,
Right.
I know in your business you have to keep changing the techniques, because it's an instance in which transparency does let someone who wants to do harm figure out what those characteristics are that people would normally expect or not expect.
Right. There's no question about that. Law enforcement has changed 1,000 times since I joined it in 1970, immediately after graduating from college. I have to stay up to speed on so many things, and believe me, it gets ahead of me. But our guys try to stay on top of it. In regard to your comments about Commissioner Gibson, I have been working with him. I was invited on his radio show. I'll be doing that shortly. I work with him in liaison with to improve relations with our African American community. We're very sensitive to that. We have good African American officers, good Hispanic officers, and we are very sensitive to that. I want you to know that.
Okay. Well, I'll come back over there and visit, because that's
Come
room
by
for
and
improvement.
we'll show you around the sheriff's office.
Thank you.
Be glad to.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, I'd love to extend that invitation to Senator Ellis to come to Senate District 22.
Well, trust me, in my work with the Innocence Project, I might be over there sooner than you want me.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, Sheriff. And